Good evening, everyone. I am sitting here in my office in Washington, D.C. It's 10 o'clock at night, and we had actually scheduled this video and telephone town hall for after we took the first vote on the debt ceiling. But apparently, my Republican colleagues do not have enough votes, so we have not voted yet. It's likely to be a long night waiting to see if we take the first vote to raise the debt ceiling. So we are literally 5 days away from the first time in U.S. history that the United States is not going to be able to pay our bills if we don't raise the debt ceiling in the next 5 days. And I don't know about you, but prior to last year, I had never heard of the debt ceiling. Now, why did we never hear of the debt ceiling? Because the debt ceiling was routinely raised. As a matter of fact, it was raised 7 times under the Bush administration. And you remember the last few years of the Bush administration, Democrats controlled both houses of Congress. The Democrats never did what we are watching my Republican colleagues do today, which is literally hold the economy of the United States of America hostage in order to move an ideological agenda. Now, if you hold the economy of the United States hostage, you are impacting the global economy. This is very scary because we are barely coming out of a recession. And frankly, we know in many parts of our community, we're in a depression. And that hasn't turned around. In Los Angeles, we have 12% unemployment. There's 9% unemployment in the nation. So for people who are losing their homes and losing their jobs or have lost their jobs, they're dealing with a depression. So with an economy as fragile as it is, the idea that my colleagues would hold us hostage to move an agenda is a very frightening concept. But as you know, many people ran last year with one goal in mind, and that was to make sure that our president was not reelected for a second term. In a minute, I thought it might be nice for me to take a moment to explain to you what the debt ceiling is to begin with. And then shortly thereafter, we'll be taking questions. I'm waiting to hear whether or not we're going to be voting tonight. As I said, it might be a long night, but then again, I guess I'm used to those. I spent many long nights in Sacramento doing almost the exact same thing. If you recall, in California, it's pretty much an annual event where every time we have to pass a budget, because we need our Republican colleagues to help us pass the budget, during those times, they decide there's several areas of public policy that in order to get their votes, we have to include in the budget bill. This year, when my colleagues in Sacramento voted for the budget, because of people watching this video and on the phone, it was the first time that we were able to pass a budget in California on a majority vote. But as you know, we needed 2/3 vote to raise revenue to avoid very deep cuts in California. Unfortunately, we didn't get those 2/3 votes for revenue, so California has a budget in place, but it's a very painful budget. So why don't I stop for a second and get some input from you with calls in, and after that, after we take a couple of calls, I will just take a minute to define for you what is the debt ceiling. Can we go to a caller?
We certainly can. We're going to take Sandra next if we can. Sandra, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having tonight. Sandra, go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, Congresswoman Bass and everyone. I'd like to know if the budget is not passed, how does that affect the citizens on the state level and a city level also, such as maybe the possibility of services being shut down or what might happen? Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your question, and why don't I take that question as an opportunity to explain to you exactly what the debt ceiling is. I do have to give my Republican colleagues credit because they have been very, very successful in confusing people and leading people to think that what we're doing here is actually passing a budget. Raising the debt ceiling has actually nothing to do with the deficit. But what my colleagues have been successful in doing is collapsing the issue. So let me just show a chart to you so that you could understand. This chart right here says on any given month, the United States owes $308 billion in bills. Now, we only bring in $178 billion in revenue. Now, what is revenue? What is income? When you pay your taxes. And taxes are paid throughout the year, not just on April 15th. So, if we have $308 billion worth of bills to pay every month, and we only bring in $178 billion, then that means that we need to borrow $130 billion in order to pay all of our bills. This is what the debt ceiling is. So raising the debt ceiling means we, as Congress, gives the president permission to borrow this much money in order to pay our monthly bills. Now, this might seem extreme to you, but this is so routine that most of you probably never heard about this until the Tea Party chose to make this a campaign issue in last year's campaign. The debt ceiling is routinely raised. The president is routinely given permission to borrow the money that's needed to pay the bills. Now, having said that, we do pay our bills back. So, if we do not give the president permission to borrow $130 billion by next Tuesday, August 2nd, that will mean we will not have enough money to pay our bills, and by law, we are obligated to pay the people that we owe money to first. And in many instances, this means paying private banks. Ironically, the federal government has some of the debt. It also means paying foreign countries like China. And I do have to tell you that there's a whole lot of, I'm almost to the point of calling it China-phobia, where the debt that we are owed to China is really overblown. We do owe China, or China owns, a lot of our debt, but it is not as much as being described. So let me just describe that if on August 2nd we have not given the president permission to borrow $130 billion, these are the bills that will be owed. This is what we have to pay after August 2nd. And you can see, this is just an example, you can see that the bulk of what we will owe is Social Security. Now, I will tell you that after we pay the people we owe our debt to, after we pay our interest, we will first pay Social Security, we will pay Medicare and Medicaid, but there will be many things that will go unpaid. Now, the Treasury Secretary, Geithner, he is the one that will decide if we don't have enough money, who isn't going to get paid. So he will decide whether or not he is going to pay veterans, whether or not he's going to pay the troops, whether or not you're going to get your tax refund if you haven't already gotten it, whether or not we are going to pay for student loans. And you can only imagine, and whether or not federal employees are going to be paid, whether or not food stamps will be paid. I do have to tell you that it's probably doubtful that if we do not raise the debt ceiling, I don't think it is difficult to imagine that students will not get their money for loans, that federal employees will not get paid, that tax refunds will not happen. So this is not an issue of the budget. This is an issue of the debt ceiling. What the Republicans are saying is that they want us to pay down our deficit at the same time that we give the president permission to borrow the $130 billion. They are saying that they will not vote for the bill to allow the president to borrow $130 billion unless we agree to cut programs that are frankly vital to our communities. So maybe we should take another question.
We will. We have a couple of other matters to take care of first, if we could, please, Congressmember Bass.
Sure.
The first thing is, if you want to sign up for our email newsletter, please press 7. Press 7 on your keypad now. Press 7, and we will get your email address down, and we will send you our email newsletter with regularity. So again, please right now press 7. Press 7 on the keypad on your phone, and we will take your email addresses down. We have plenty of operators to stand by. Please be patient. We see there's about 160 to 170 people that just hit that button. Next, we want to tell people what our Twitter and our Facebook ways are to keep in touch with us, and I'm going to dig those up right now. There we go. Your Twitter account is at Rep. Karen Bass on Twitter, and Facebook is facebook.com/Rep. Karen Bass. Those are other ways where you can connect to the congressional office, to your congressional office. And finally, we have our first polling question of the night before we get to Doris, and that's going to be, the question is, would you like to attend a telephone town hall on? Press 1 if it's on education reform. Press 2 on the keypad on your phone if it's the environment. Press 3 if it's the federal budget. And press 4 if it's resources for ex-offenders. Actually, that question is wrong, and I apologize. I'm gonna redo that question in just a second. I'm going to take Doris next. I think it got loaded improperly, and I apologize. Doris, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having tonight. Doris, what's your question, please?
I want to ask the Congresswoman, what is the objection to the President using his executive powers to just end this mess and let it be, because he got some crazy people there?
Well, I have to tell you, Doris, I think you must be here with me. You know, some people in the White House believe that the President actually does not have that authority. I will tell you that there's many of us in Congress that feel that he does have that authority, but his legal counsel says he does not. It says that he cannot raise the debt ceiling without going through Congress. I wished he could.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Many people don't know it, but my website is really the best place to find information and help from my office. And not only can you follow me on Facebook and Twitter, but you can also watch videos of me on YouTube, and the videos would be of press conferences and me answering various questions. All of this is on my website, karenbass.house.gov.
We're going to try that polling question if we can.
Okay.
Again, please. I guess I did read it right. What kind of town hall would you like to attend? Would you like to attend a town hall on education reform? Press 1. On the environment, press 2. The federal budget, press 3. Or resources for ex-offenders, press 4. We appreciate your participation in this, and we're going to take another question right away.
Actually, before we go to that question, let me just say that the town hall question, you know, many times in the district we have town hall community meetings, not town halls on video or by telephone. And so we want to get a sense of what would you like to see a big community gathering about. And you know, because of the budget cuts in Sacramento, about 40,000 folks who are currently incarcerated are going to be released into the state of California. And you know, one of the big issues in our community is the fact that folks pay their debt to society, they do their time, and then they come out and they're kind of left in limbo. So the purpose of that town hall would be to talk about resources to help people reintegrate successfully and safely back into society.
Okay, well, I think Irma, go ahead with your question if you would, please.
Well, thank you for taking my call. My question was on a more personal level. I was concerned about the seniors being one of those, whether or not we were going to be able to get our Social Security checks and also the Social Security disability checks. Well, that was kind of answered earlier when the question was arisen, and it said that more than likely those checks would go out. The other question that I had to do with the grants for the students, and that has almost been answered. And what I want to know at this point is there a way to prioritize who is after these people are paid? How are we going to know who is going to be next in line?
Well, that's a very good question. I will tell you a couple things. First of all, it is to the discretion of the Treasury Secretary, Geithner. he's the one that makes the decision. However, a number of my colleagues are proposing legislation that would prioritize. I mean, for example, one of the priorities is defense contractors. And I know defense contractors aren't very popular in the 33rd District. So what that means is I'm not talking about the troops. I'm talking about the private businesses that do some of the work for the military. They actually are on the priority list. So some of my colleagues are proposing a reprioritization of that list.
Before we take our next question, I want to say that anybody that's pressed 7 right now, please be patient. We have 9 volunteers standing by to get your email addresses, and we're getting through them as fast as possible. Again, we appreciate your patience. We have another polling question that we want to do before we take on the next questioner, and the question is, how should we reduce the deficit? Press 1 if it's cuts, press 2 if it's cuts in revenue, and press 3 if revenues only. Again, the question is, and you vote for this on the keypad on your phone, how should we reduce the deficit? Press 1 for cuts, 2 for cuts in revenue, and 3 for revenues only. John, you're next. John, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having tonight with Congressmember Bass. John, what's your question, please? John, are you there? I think John fell right off, and I apologize for that. I think we'll take the next person. He just fell off. Let's say we're going to take the good doctor. Doctor, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having tonight. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, I'm wondering why debt ceiling has been raised several times under various administrations. How come this one is different? Is it because it's Obama? Is it because it's a black man?
Well,
did you get my question?
Oh, yes, I understand your question quite clearly. Well, I will tell you that many of my colleagues that were elected to Congress, and for those of you that are just joining, I am Congressmember Karen Bass, a new member of Congress. I've been here for 7 months, and what a 7 months it's been. You have joined a town hall to update everyone on the negotiations that are currently going on to raise the debt ceiling. You know, for the first time that anyone can recall here, and there are many members of Congress that have been here for several decades, this has never happened before. The debt ceiling is raised routinely, but the Tea Party decided to make this a major campaign issue last year, and they elected over 50 new members of Congress. So needless to say, they are quite influential in the Republican caucus. One of the reasons why they made it an issue is because they are against the president, and many people came here with the #1 goal in mind was to make sure that President Obama only had 1 term. I can tell you, as partisan as things were under President Bush, as much as people didn't like President Bush, the debt ceiling was raised 7 times before, and like I said at the beginning of this call, I think probably the majority of you listening, myself included, had never heard of the debt ceiling prior to last year. I do believe it's about Obama.
We're going to take a question from online next if we can, and this is from Darren. Darren's question is there an alternative that the Democrats are proposing in contrast to what is currently on the table as the GOP debt bill?
Oh, the Democrats actually have proposed many, many alternatives. I will tell you that right now, as we speak, there is an alternative that's being developed in the Senate by Senate President Harry Reid. I don't know that I necessarily agree with what the direction that Senator Reid is going, but the Democrats have proposed an alternative, and I think what Senator Reid is doing is really a last-ditch effort. What we would like to see in the House, we want the debt ceiling to be raised this year, just like it has been raised in every year previously. I mean, one of the first times we raised the debt ceiling, if you want to know, was in the 1700s. That's how long we've been doing this. And so what we believe should happen is the debt ceiling should be raised simply. We should pass a bill with 1 sentence, if you will, that says President Obama has the authority to borrow $130 billion a month, if that's what's needed, to pay our bills. Simply, that's what should be done. What my Republican colleagues have done very successfully is They have confused the issue and collapsed the issue, raising the debt ceiling with addressing the deficit. Now, I absolutely believe the deficit needs to be addressed, and one of the best ways to address the deficit is to end the tax cuts that were given to the millionaires and billionaires in the United States. Exxon just reported record profits. Gas prices have gone up, and they're celebrating today in the Wall Street Journal reporting record profits. We could end the Bush tax cuts. We could certainly draw down the wars. We could end the oil subsidies. There's a lot of scenarios that we had, a lot of solutions that we had to number one, reduce the deficit, and then number two, raise the debt ceiling in a clean bill. And my colleague from Vermont, Representative Welch, has House Bill H.R. 2663, and that is a bill that I have signed on as a co-sponsor, which says raise the debt ceiling and don't hold the debt ceiling hostage by attaching things that you couldn't pass in ordinary times.
Thank you, Congressmember Bass. We've got a couple of items to take care of. We'd like you to join Facebook. That's facebook.com/Rep. Karen Bass. We'd like you to join us on Twitter, and that's the @Rep. Karen Bass. And please check out our website. It's karenbass.house.gov. We're going to take another question in a second, but we have a question of the audience right now, of the listeners rather. And the question is, who do you think the government should pay first? If you think it's the veterans and troops, press 1. If you think it's Social Security beneficiaries, press 2. If you think it's federal employees, press 3. If you think it's tax refunds, press 4. Again, the question is, who do you think the government should pay first? Veterans and troops, press 1. Social Security beneficiaries, press 2. Federal employees, press 3. Tax refunds, press 4. And lastly, for everybody that's pressed 7 to give us your email address, please stand by. Our people are working as fast as they can to take your email addresses down. We've had a great turnout for that tonight, and we really appreciate it. Lakeitha is going to be next. Lakeitha, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having tonight. Lakeitha, what's your question, please?
If we're authorizing the president to borrow money, where does that money come from?
The money comes from several places. It comes from banks here in the United States, and it comes from overseas. It comes from many different countries overseas. I had mentioned a few minutes ago that I think in this building we have a little bit of China phobia. Everybody thinks that everything comes from China, including all of our debt, and it doesn't. So China is one of many countries that we borrow money from, but we also borrow money from major U.S. banks as well. Let me just say, for those of you that are watching online, you can post your answers to the polling questions in the comment box. And also, if you have questions that you're not able to get through, you can also ask those online.
We're going to take our next question, if we can, from Joe. Joe, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having tonight with Congressmember Bass. Joe, what's your question, please?
Congresswoman Bass, I was very pleased to hear that you and some others are proposing a clean bill, just raise the debt ceiling, which is the form it's always taken hundreds of times. And I wonder what's going on that President Obama has jumped into this mess with the Republicans and tried to attach his kind of conditions, and because I think that's really harmful. The more people that cop that simple raising, the better it'll be.
No, okay, and I'm sorry, I believe part of your question I didn't understand, but let me just answer that. You know, the president, if you remember a few months ago, called for a clean bill just to raise the debt ceiling. The fact of the matter is, until we get both houses of Congress back, the Republicans in the House of Representatives absolutely control things, giving them the power to hold all of us hostage and to put things into the debt ceiling bill that many of us don't like. And they have successfully collapsed the issue, reducing the deficit with raising the debt ceiling. And a lot of people think what we're doing here, just like an earlier caller, is addressing the budget, and we're not addressing the budget at all. We're just simply giving the government permission to pay its bills.
We're going to take another question right away if we can. It's got from Marie. Marie, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having with Congressmember Bass tonight. Marie, what's your question, please?
Congressman Bass, thank you for taking my call. But I want to know, why is it so difficult for the Republicans and the Democrats to not want to raise the debt ceiling? When when President Obama arrived in the office, we got a real big debt that was already in. We were fighting two wars. We really was in a depression at that time.
Right.
The economy is slowly beginning to rise. And I'm very aware because I keep up with politics.
And good for you.
That the Democrats and the Republicans not act, because it's only 2% of the higher income people that they want to raise the taxes on. Why do they want to make any Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security? Why do they want to set priorities for that when all our vets are coming home sick, over 3,000 of them disabled? Why doesn't the Congress get together? If we're sending them there uneducated, we need to get rid of them, all of them, and cut their checks 20%. I am so fed up with this. I don't know what to do. They didn't do this to Reagan. They didn't do it to Bush Sr., and they didn't do it to Bush Jr. Now, I want to know, why is it so bad now? When the next thing's coming, it's going to be the same thing.
I don't know. I think I'm gonna recruit you to run for Congress. I think you are extremely well informed, and I agree with everything you said. I do think that, some of my Republican colleagues really believe that we shouldn't pay for certain things in our society, and that's very troubling to me. I mean, I think that coming from the richest country in the history of the world, on the planet, we should be able to figure out how to educate our population, how to provide health care, and how to provide shelter. Those are fundamental values to me. But my Republican colleagues don't really share those values, and they pretty much agree that everybody has bootstraps and everybody should be able to pull themselves up. I happen to be very concerned about the people that don't have boots. Let me just tell you that there is no reason why we shouldn't just simply raise the debt ceiling exactly as you said. This is the first time this is being done to a president. You are absolutely right. When President Obama was sworn in, and I was fortunate enough to be here and watch him raise his hand and take that oath, he inherited a disaster. The United States economy was on the brink of a catastrophe. And the only way out of that, frankly, was to incur more debt. That might seem not logical, but just think about the auto industry and all of those people that are currently working in the auto industry when he, quote unquote, bailed out the auto industry. And you know that most of those companies have repaid all of the money. And as a matter of fact, the United States made money off of that because we were paid interest. He intervened in our economy and injected resources in a way that was absolutely necessary. Now, one of my frustrations is the billions and billions of dollars that was injected into our economy, not all of that money has hit the streets, and there's a whole lot of streets in the 33rd District that money has not, has not seen that money. And so we need to do more to make sure that that money rolls out in the 33rd District and many other parts of our country that's so desperately in need. I think that they're obsessed about ending his presidency. I think that that's absolutely a tragedy. As much as I was opposed to President Bush, I never even dawned on me to be as disrespectful of him as I have seen people be of this president. Could you imagine anybody questioning where President Bush was born? Or imagine questioning his education? And frankly, we could have questioned his education. But we never did that, questioning whether or not the president went to Harvard or whether he was qualified to be in there. He was the president of the Harvard Law Review, but yet he's suspect. So I'm very concerned and want to make sure that he is reelected and, frankly, that we take back both houses of Congress. But I better go to another question now.
We're going to take an online question from Joyce, and the question is, Why does President Obama continue to try and reason with Republicans? It is a waste of time.
But you know,
be doing other things.
But the fact of the matter is, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear in my answer earlier, he has no choice. The Republicans control the House of Representatives. If you want a bill passed, you have to deal with those that are in power. So for people who don't understand why he's had to compromise, we really need to understand that the nation is being held hostage, and the ransom that the Republicans have put on their note that they delivered to the Oval Office, the price was too high to pay. So until they lower the price or take some of the items off of their ransom note, we're all going to continue to be held hostage. Now, if the Democrats were in control of both houses of Congress, I think the debt ceiling would have been raised by now.
We're going to take another question. It's going to be from Sharon, and I wanted to say that last question came in from Visible Vote. We appreciate your participation tonight on that. Sharon is next. Sharon, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having with Congressmember Bass tonight. Sharon, what is your question, please?
Hi, my question is mainly in the form also of a statement. I worked for 30 years for a major corporation. I worked sometimes 5 and 7 days a week because there was a policy through storm troubles or whatever to work sometimes from 5 o'clock in the morning till after 2 o'clock at midnight in a.m. the next day. This wasn't 2 or 3 times. This was all the time. All of a sudden now, because during that time period, I also became disabled. I'm living off of Social Security. That's my bread and butter now. And I want to know, how did I all of a sudden become an entitlement? Because I'm now getting something that I've worked for hard for almost 30 years, and the major corporation I work for is a job creator who was in the process of even then consolidating and downsizing. That's all they do, and that's to incur better profits. Now most of the jobs that I used to do, and many of the people I work with, who are also on Social Security now, they're being told the jobs that they used to do are overseas or in Texas and what have you. That used to be done here in California. How did we become entitlements for something that we worked hard for all these years?
You know, let me just tell you, first of all, for those of you that are just joining, this is Congressmember Karen Bass, and I'm trying to give you an update on the ongoing negotiations to raise the debt ceiling. You know, as I listen to you, you know, I hear your voice, and what I hear is somebody who frankly is insulted and offended, and I think you have every right to be. The fact that it is considered an entitlement, I don't think that's a negative word. I think that's a positive word, because you have worked, you put in the time, you are entitled, because that was the guarantee and the commitment that our country made to you. And I believe that we need to continue that commitment. Now, the battle that's going on here is that there's some people that don't believe that folks should be entitled. Again, if you don't have boots, you're in trouble, because everybody's supposed to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And the way that the Republicans wanted to change Medicare really ends Medicare, because it ends the fundamental commitment of our society that says when everyone turns 65, you have contributed to our society for decades. The least we could do is make sure that you don't wind up sleeping on the street because you couldn't pay a hospital bill. That's the battle of ideas that is taking place here. Should anybody, should our government make a commitment to people? I believe our government should. Some people do not believe that the government should make those type of commitments. And I'm very sorry that you have been offended and insulted, and you have every right to be angry.
Thank you, Congressmember Bass. We're going to do the first polling question again. If you didn't get a chance to vote on this, because we did it very early on this call, please vote now. You get to vote by pressing the keypad, your keypad on your phone. Who would you like to attend? What would you like the next town hall, the physical town hall, to be on? Education reform, press 1. The environment, press 2. Press 3 if it's the federal budget, and press 4 if it's resources for ex-offenders. Again, the next town hall should be on education reform, press 1. The environment, press 2. Federal budget, press 3. Resources for ex-offenders, press 4. We will give you a tally at the end of the call to tell you what people think. We're going to take Anasha next. I hope I said your name right. Go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm hoping that at some juncture there are people behind the scenes pointing out to Boehner that indeed he cannot work with the Tea Party folks. Are there individuals that you are aware of trying to pull together behind either initially going back to the idea of a clean bill or dealing with some of the shared sacrifices so that we can move this forward? Are there negotiations going on behind the scenes between Democrats and Republicans within the House and then between the House and the Senate?
Well, let me just tell you that, yes, there are negotiations going on behind the scenes. What I don't think they're negotiating, though, I wish they were, and I wish I could tell you this, I don't believe they're negotiating over a clean, let's just raise the debt ceiling bill. I happen to, and I don't know Speaker Boehner personally, but in knowing his history, I believe he probably would like to see us just raise the debt ceiling, because I think he's a grown-up. But, you know, he is being held hostage by the members in his caucus that are in the Tea Party, and unfortunately, they hold enough votes that he cannot just ignore them, in the same way that the president can't just say, to heck with you, you know, I'm not going to compromise you. The president cannot do that, because at the end of the day, you have to pass legislation, which means you have to have the votes. And Speaker Boehner has too many Tea Party people, and he can't get the votes together. They are in behind-the-scenes negotiation. And if you don't mind, let me, for people that are joining us, I think everybody knows we're 5 days away from Armageddon, as they're calling it. I guess we had Carmageddon in Los Angeles. I happened to have been here that weekend. I heard it didn't pan out that way, and I'm very glad about that. But we are 5 days away from the first time in U.S. history, our country not being able to pay its bills. I showed this chart earlier. Every month, the United States has $308 billion in bills. We bring in, from all of you, $178 billion in taxes. People do pay their taxes all year long. That's why $178 billion is what we bring in every month. Well, if you subtract, you get $130 billion short. So think of it this way. You get your paycheck, you have 10 bills in your hand, you can't pay them all, you pick and choose which bills you pay, right? Many of us do things that way. Well, the United States can't afford to do that. We need to pay all of our bills every month, and so if we don't have the money to pay our bills, that means then that a number of people will not be paid. And let me just tell you that even if you are not on food stamps, even if you are not waiting for a tax refund, even if you're not a student waiting for a loan or a federal employee, if we do not raise the debt ceiling in 5 days, every single person is going to be affected, and let me tell you how. You know the credit agencies that give you your scores, what are they called? Expedia, I think, is one. No, Experian. Equifax, everybody knows those. You know those three agencies? Well, can you imagine this? You have a credit rating of 700, and overnight, that number drops down to 300. What does that mean? That means your interest rates go up. So let me just tell you that if we can't raise the debt ceiling in 5 days, that's going to happen to each one of us. Now, I don't mean your credit score is going to drop, but what I do mean is that you're going to pay more for interest, because the United States will not be able to pay our bills. So what happens then? The Treasury Secretary, Geithner, he chooses who's going to get paid and who isn't. Now let me tell you who is more than likely to get paid, okay? Because these are some of the initial guarantees. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, and we pay our debt before we pay any of those, okay? So the people who we already owe money to, they get paid first. So after that, then Geithner decides whether or not he pays veterans, whether or not he He pays the troops, tax refunds, food stamps, student loans, and federal employees.
We're going to suggest to people that if they wanted to provide us their email address tonight, that would be great. You get to press 7 on the keypad on your phone if you wanted to do that. Our collectors have finally gotten through all the volunteers. We had more than 200 in the last wave. So please, 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 if you want to provide us your email address, that'll get you the electronic newsletter, which comes out with regularity. Again, please press 7. Press 7 now, and we'll have one of our volunteers get that email address from you.
And let me ask you to please do that, okay? Because by law here, we can only send you a newsletter if you request it. And the only way for you to request it is by hitting that number, which, what did you say, number 7? You have to hit that and request the newsletter, and that way you can stay in touch with us every week. But you can also go on the website, which is karenbass.house.gov. You can join me on Facebook, which is facebook.com/REP Karen Bass, or you can find me on Twitter at REP Karen Bass. Thank you. That's a commercial.
This next question is from Visible Vote. That's an online question, Visible Vote. Is there any and this is from Jay Smith, is there any possibility of including the revenues in Senator Reid's Senate bill?
Oh, I wish there was a possibility of including revenue. I wish there was, but I don't believe so. Let me just tell you that in Senator Reid's bill, what is proposed now, this could change, okay, but this is what it is as I know it now. He is proposing $2.7 trillion in spending cuts. I wonder, does anybody know how to write a trillion? Do you know how to write a trillion? How many zeros is that? Anyway, I don't even know. $2.7 trillion in spending cuts over the next decade. And so for $2.7 trillion in cuts, we would raise the debt ceiling $2.4 trillion, which means we would be able to borrow enough money every month until the end of 2012, okay? But he is not talking about any cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, which sadly to say, especially when it comes to Social Security, some of my Republican colleagues want to take your Social Security money and gamble it on Wall Street. That means privatizing Social Security. So the way Reid is talking about doing some of the cuts or indirectly raising revenue, this is how we would score savings, okay, if you're following me with the jargon. Well, if we hire more IRS agents, we can enforce the tax code better. And I know many of you watching this video or on the telephone are not big tax cheats because you have to hire a lot of attorneys and a lot of accountants to avoid your taxes, so they're not talking about us. Looking at fraud and waste in things like Medicaid, and then also counting in the money that we would save from drawing down in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Senator Reid is also calling for a committee of 12 members of the House and 12 members of the Senate who would look for other options to reduce the deficit. Now, let me just say, and I've said this several times, unfortunately, our Republican colleagues have confused the issue by collapsing raising the debt ceiling with reducing the deficit. Very important things to do, but it is not critical that we even address the deficit by Tuesday. We must address the debt ceiling by Tuesday. Because the Republicans are holding the country hostage, we have to agree to some of their ransom items. So one of the ransom items we agreed to is we agreed to reduce the deficit while we're addressing the debt ceiling. So that's why we're talking about cuts. That's why we're talking about savings and committees. We really shouldn't be talking about any of it at all. We should be simply raising the debt ceiling, allowing the president to borrow the money so we can pay our bills.
We're going to take another live question if we can right now. It's going to be from Michael. Michael, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having with Congressmember Bass tonight. Michael, what's your question, please?
Yes, good evening, Congresswoman Bass. My question simply is, how do you see this whole scenario playing out by Tuesday? Certainly Speaker Boehner's bill will probably pass. I think it'll pass the House, but probably die in the Senate. What happens after that? And you did address a little bit how we would address the deficit issues. I'd like to know more, maybe more specifically, how do you see those deficit issues being addressed in the long term? Because frankly, I think the debt ceiling discussion really is more of a sideshow. I think our bigger problems are our debt and our deficit, and I'd like to know from you what you think in the long term needs to be done about it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me just tell you something. We all thought he had the votes to pass it out of this House, but he doesn't. And I got a note passed. Kimmy, my legislative director, just passed me a note that said we're not voting tonight. So I've been here now waiting for 4.5 hours because Speaker Boehner said we were all going to vote at 6:30 at night. And you know, for us here, it's 10:45. So we've been waiting, and I guess they decided that they couldn't get the votes. So they can't even get the votes in their own caucus for the Speaker's plan. And, you know, for those of you that know me, you know I served as Speaker in Sacramento, and I just couldn't even imagine my members not voting for my bill. But that's another story. How do I feel that we could address the deficit? Well, the first thing we could do is end the Bush tax cuts. That is one of the major drivers of the deficit. We could certainly get out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm happy to say that we are winding down in Iraq. I was there earlier this year, so I could see firsthand that we are definitely ending our involvement in Iraq. And so if you looked at the wars, if you looked at the Bush tax cuts, there are a lot of ways that we can reduce the deficit. I'm also a person that believes that we should reform the tax code. I believe that we should broaden the taxes. There's a lot of things that we don't tax in our society. So I think that there's a variety of ways to reduce the deficit, and I do believe it's a problem. I'm not saying that it isn't. I just know that it's not important for us to address the deficit in the next 5 days. The deficit will be there for quite a while. It is absolutely imperative that we address the debt ceiling in the next 5 days.
We're going to take another question from the online visible vote. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody, this is the last opportunity tonight. If you want to press 7 on the keypad on your phone, that would be great. We can get your email address so you can be kept up to date on all sorts of matters of happenings going on in Washington. So if you'd like to provide us your email address tonight, please press 7. Press 7 on the keypad on your phone, and we have people standing by. They've gotten through 250, 300 of these tonight so far, but they're ready for the next wave. So thank you. Anyway, we have a question in from Carolyn Williams from Visible Vote, and the question is, are there any legal steps we as voters can take to force Republicans to stop using the debt ceiling for their own political gain?
I'm sorry, could you please tell me that question again?
Are there any legal steps we as voters can take to force the Republicans to stop using the debt ceiling for their own political gain? That's from Carolyn Williams.
You know, Ms. Williams, I certainly wish that there was a way that we could, that there was a legal way that we could stop them from using the debt ceiling for their own political gains. I really do. I'll tell you, though, you might want to call Speaker Boehner if you want to talk to him. I mean, I'm sure you won't talk to him, but if you want to call his office, his number is area code 202-225-0600. And, you know, offer him a little bit of help. Tell him that what could we do to help his Republican colleagues in the hostage crisis in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressmember Bass. We're going to repeat the second question, the second polling question. How should we reduce the deficit? Press 1 on the keypad on your phone if it should be just cuts. If it's cuts in revenue, press 2. And if it's revenue only, press 3. We appreciate your participation. I'm going to botch this name, but I'm going to try. Alvader, you are next. I hope I said your name right. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Good. Go ahead with your question, please.
Okay, my question, you've spoken of it many times on a clean bill for the debt ceiling, and then you have plenty of time to work on a compromise for working out reducing the debt. And I just want to say, I don't have a computer at home, but I do watch you on C-SPAN, and I saw you on the Washington Journal a couple of times.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that. I hope I did okay.
She's moved into the listening queue. Go ahead, please, Congressmember.
Okay. Well, you know, I think that I am hopeful. I guess we're going to be going home after this because they weren't able to get the votes tonight. Let me just tell you what the sequence of events is going to be that I believe. I actually am one that believes that we will solve this by August 2nd. I don't believe that the majority of the Republicans want to see the United States go off the cliff and frankly impact the entire world, because the world economy is so fragile right now. You could throw the United States back into a recession, and our communities that are already in a depression, I'm not sure how much worse it could be, but it would certainly drive up the unemployment rate all the more if we do not raise the debt ceiling. There are a variety of ways that we could address the deficit. We do need to separate those two issues. If we do have cuts, and I know we will, we have to make sure that those cuts don't do more damage to our economy. You know, it kills me when I hear people talk about cuts, because most of the time when they're talking about cuts, they're talking about jobs. Well, when we already have 9% unemployment in the United States, why would we want to throw more people into unemployment? I do believe you can make cuts. I do. There's a lot of things that I think you could cut, and let me give you an example. Or let me put it another way, a lot of ways you can get savings. There's tens of billions of dollars in fraud in Medicare every year. And if you watch one of the news magazines like Dateline or 60 Minutes, every year or so they do a story about how people set up these fake companies and they order like wheelchairs and other medical supplies, and they bill Medicare, and there's no patients there. There's ways that we can save money that don't hurt people. But make no mistake about it, it's really not about spending. It's about a philosophical debate over what is the role of government, and should government be in the business of being a safety net for people, or should everybody look for bootstraps to pull themselves up by? That's the debate.
I'm going to review the results of the questions tonight. What kind of town hall would you like to attend? By leaps and bounds, it was one concerning the federal budget, 54%.
Oh, okay.
The next question
Okay.
The next question is, how should we reduce the deficit? Okay, this one's pretty interesting. Cuts in revenue were 51%. Revenue only was 35%. Cuts were 13%. What do you think about that?
That sounds about like the 33rd District, I must say, and it's very interesting to know that people want to have a town hall on the federal budget, so we will certainly look to do that, and I think it's important to do because I'm telling you, there's so much confusion out there, there really is. Let me just tell everybody that's watching or listening that on Sunday, August 14th, we are going to have a town hall on health care reform. In spite of what you hear, and I hate when they use the term Obamacare, because that's not what it is. It's health care reform. It's expanding health coverage to 30 million people. It's making sure that if you have a medical condition that you will not go bankrupt. We are going to have that town hall at the University of Southern California, USC Health Care Reform Town Hall. It will be, you can go to my website at karenbass.house.gov. August 14th, that's a Sunday, town hall on healthcare reform. We are very lucky in California that we have Kamala Harris as our Attorney General and we have Dave Jones as our Insurance Commissioner, because those two individuals will make sure that healthcare reform is implemented in California. The town hall will be at 3 p.m. on Sunday, karenbass.house.gov at the University of Southern California. You can RSVP online.
Our last question is, who do you think the government should pay first? 70% said Social Security beneficiaries, 26% veterans and troops, federal employees was 2%, and there were 7 people that wanted their tax refunds. So that was 1%. Anyway, that's the results of our poll tonight. Now, we didn't have time to answer everybody's questions tonight. We have still a lot of people wanting to ask questions. We have some sort of resolve for that. If you could stay to the end of the call, which is just a few more minutes longer, you can leave us a voicemail. Please leave us a voicemail. Leave us your name, your phone number, and most importantly, your email address, because we can get back to you even quicker if you give us your email address. So for those people that want to ask questions, even if you didn't hit 0, stay on to the end of the call. Leave us your name, your phone number, and your email address, because we'll get back to you even quicker that way. I would say the office would get back in the next week with all the people that are going to be still wanting to ask questions. We have that many people willing to ask. And Congressmember Bass, I think we're about out of time, so I think we have to kind of wrap it up. Go ahead, please.
Well, great. And let me just thank everyone who has participated either on the phone or via video. If you are going to leave a voicemail, I would love your feedback. Do you like receiving information like this? Is this helpful? What could we do better? You know, because I am in D.C. and I'm not able to be in the district as much as I was when I was in Sacramento, I like to stay in touch and communicate with you. And so if this is a format that works and you like it, especially when we're in a crisis like this, then we'll do it again. If you have some opinions about how we can do it better, I'd appreciate hearing it. As you know, we're on the countdown. 5 days to go. Will we make history in this kind of way? Will the United States government default for the first time in its history? And will we negatively impact the economy of the planet? Will we raise taxes on everyone? Because frankly, if my interest rates go up, that feels like a tax to me. To a party that says they don't want a tax, in 5 days, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, everybody's going to be taxed. So please, if you want to call the speaker, Speaker Boehner, 202-225-0600, tell him to raise the debt ceiling and do it in a clean fashion. Don't hurt our economy and our communities to make a political point. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I do hope to see you, but next time in person in Los Angeles. Thank you very much.